The year is 1980. The Rubik's Cube first appears on store shelves, and to this day, I have no idea how anyone ever managed to figure that thing out. On May 18th, Mount St. Helens erupts in the state of Washington, killing 57 people and causing around $3 billion damage. Finally, as a reaction to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the United States boycotts the Summer Olympics in Moscow.
Did 20 joys around her heart, black and liberty love boys. I tore my knees up getting to you cause I needed to find out what the thing was for. I've been reading.
The debut album from the Pretenders was an immediate success. It debuted at number 1 in the UK and cracked the top 10 in the US. It contains all original material with one important exception, Stop Your Sobbing, which was the first of 4 singles released from this record. That tune, of course, was written by legendary Kinks frontman Ray Davies. Around this time, Pretenders guitarist, lead singer, and songwriter Chrissie Hynde met Ray Davies, triggering a relationship that would eventually result in the birth of a child. Now, I've always looked at Chrissie Hynde as the sort of female Keith Richards. She liked to wear leather pants. She played a telly slung kind of low. She even had the same haircut. And her music and attitude were pure, gritty rock and roll. Songs like Precious, Tattooed Love Boys, and The Weight are borderline punk rock. I can't think of too many women who were writing this kind of material at this time. The album also has a much softer side, though. The aforementioned Stop Your Sobbing and Kid, which is a gorgeous piece of pop on so many levels. The lyrics are pretty intense, though. According to Chrissie Hynde, it's a song about a woman who is on the game to pay her way through life. It wasn't her first choice, but just a sobering reality. She is saddened when her child finds out what she does to pay the bills. Kid, what changed your mood? You've gone all sad, so I feel sad too. I think I know some things you never outgrow. You think it's wrong, I can tell you do. The song starts in the key of C major and uses the classic 1-6-4-5 progression that was used in just about every other rock and roll song of the 1950s. Then we get an abrupt modulation into A minor for the bridge, and then yet another modulation into E major for James Honeyman Scott's brilliant guitar solo. I swear to God, Honeyman Scott must have been directly influenced by George Harrison's Nowhere Man solo here. Same key, similar feel, similar clear ringing tone. He even pinches that chimey little 5th fret harmonic at the end. Very cool. Departure was Journey's highest charting album at the time, making it to number 8 on the Billboard 200, their very first top 10. Notably, this is also the final Journey album to feature keyboardist vocalist Gregg Rolie, and I think that's very significant. For me, the classic era of Journey will always be the one that featured both Steve Perry and Gregg Rolie. Rolie's deep, husky voice was the perfect foil for Perry's insane countertenor. But really, everybody in this band can sing. I've always dug People and Places. It's got a great lead vocal from guitarist Neal Schon. And I've always liked the intro. It's got a great churchy vibe. Think Led Zeppelin's Your Time Is Gonna Come. So that was D7, D7/C, D11/C, and B flat/F. Do you see the faces round and round the places? Are there people that you want to know? The album is actually fairly eclectic. You've got the feel-good pop stuff like Any Way You Want It and Where Were You? I love the way Sean would throw a savage guitar solo into the catchiest little pop song, Any Way You Want It being a great example. You've got a couple of bluesy numbers, Walks Like a Lady and I'm Crying, and Line of Fire, which is just straight up hard rock. The album closes with Homemade Love, a rockin' little tune that is really just a vehicle for the band to show off their incredible musicianship, particularly Steve Perry. He tops out in his vocal range here, hitting a couple of A5s towards the end. Unbelievable. Greg Raleigh said this tune was a particular favorite because it was such a musician's song. Recorded after a fairly long period of inactivity for the band, Duke was the 10th studio album from Genesis, the 4th with Phil Collins as lead vocalist. It became the band's first #1 hit in the UK and reached number 11 on the Billboard Top 200. As the new decade dawned, many of the old 70s prog rock bands were reconfiguring their approach. Genesis was definitely one. Alongside the more traditional progressive rock fare, we get some shorter songs, ones that were obviously aimed at the radio market. Another great example of this was Rush with their Permanent Waves album. I covered that one on my top 10 hard rock metal albums of 1980. The album's opening track, Turn It On Again, is a great example of the new 1980s era Genesis. It totally rocks, it was a huge hit, and you can instantly groove to it. You don't even notice that in the verses you're hearing alternate measures of 6/4 and 7/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And now back into 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. By the way, don't you just love Phil Collins in that video? Balding, rocking the Hawaiian shirt, hand in pocket, while he belts out that savage vocal. He always had such a great non-rock star vibe. The lyrics are great too. It's about a guy who does nothing but watch TV all day, to the point where he loses touch with reality and even begins to think that the characters he sees on the screen are his friends. Substitute social media or gaming for the television here, and this song is still painfully relevant today. The album's third single was Misunderstanding. It did fine in the US and the UK, but for some reason it really took off in Canada, soaring all the way to #1. These are some brutal lyrics here, almost certainly inspired by Phil Collins' own marriage, which was disintegrating around this time. To we, the listeners, it's painfully obvious that the song's narrator is being utterly ghosted by his love interest, but he's still eager to write it off as cross signals, some kind of misunderstanding. Well, there must be some misunderstanding. There must be some kind of mistake. I waited in the rain for hours, and you were late.
Correct that whip. Give the pass a slip. Step on the brick. Break your mama's back.
Freedom of Choice is Devo's third album and contains what is by far their biggest hit. We just heard it, of course, the weird and wonderful Whip It. That song made it to number 8 on Billboard's Club Play singles chart. In addition, those of you who are around my age will undoubtedly remember the music video for this track, which was in pretty heavy rotation in the early days of MTV. It features singer Mark Mothersbaugh whipping various articles of clothing off of a woman as she stands in some sort of corral in what appears to be a dude ranch. And while that obviously superficially fits the theme of Whip It and makes for a very funny but controversial video, it's really nothing to do with what the song is about. The band says it was inspired by Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking, which espoused a can-do, take the bull by the horns philosophy. The lyrics seem to freely alternate between motivational speech and silly non sequitur, which for me pretty much sums up the appeal of this band. Crack that whip, give the past a slip, step on a crack, break your mama's back. When a problem comes along, you must whip it. Before the cream sets out too long, you must whip it. It's not too late. To whip it good. And I have to talk about Girl You Want, another great tune that was the first single released from the album. Every time I hear it, it messes with my head because I always want to turn the beat around in that intro. The tune starts with a classic, quirky little Devo riff. Okay, now my brain wants to hear those first two notes as pickup notes. For those of you who aren't aware, if a song has pickup notes, it essentially means it starts with an incomplete measure, rather than starting on the one beat as we would expect. So this is the way I want to hear it. I hear those first two notes as 4 and then moving on to 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Do you hear it? And since all we hear is the riff in the beginning, there's no background, it works great. I'm grooving to it. Everything's cool until those drums come in, and then it becomes apparent that the riff really did start on the 1. In reality, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I sort of trip over myself every time. It's really cool. It just goes to show that context is everything in music. As many of you will know, the band's name is short for de-evolution, the group's theory that at a certain point, humanity stopped evolving and is now regressing. I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to argue with that theory in 2024. The title track to this album takes a similar negative view of humanity. It's about how most people think they want freedom of choice, but in reality, it's superficial. Like the difference between Coke and Pepsi. When it comes to the big stuff, most people really just want to be told what to do. I love the refrain at the end. Freedom of choice is what you got. Freedom from choice is what you want.
I know something about opening the windows and doors. I know.
What you've just heard there was a very revolutionary drum sound for the time, making use of what is known as gated reverb, developed by this album's producer Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham. By the way, this is not the last we'll see of Lillywhite in this video. He produced another classic album in 1980. Now that drum part, by the way, is played by Peter Gabriel's old Genesis bandmate Phil Collins. As soon as Gabriel heard that drum part with the gated reverb, he got very excited and declared that Collins and the album's other drummer, Jerry Marotta, would not be using cymbals on the record. An interesting idea, very reminiscent of producer Brian Eno's Oblique Strategies. I discussed this when I covered David Bowie's Lodger album in my 1979 video. Oblique Strategies is where you impose artificial constraints on the players, forcing them out of their comfort zone and causing them to think more creatively. And in case that gated reverb effect sounds maddeningly familiar, yes, you've definitely heard it elsewhere. Collins was to make great use of it the next year in his smash hit In the Air Tonight. Who could forget that? Probably the most memorable drum entrance ever.
Some strangers to you and me.
This is Peter Gabriel's third solo album after leaving Genesis, and as any Gabriel fan will know, his first three solo albums didn't really have titles, so this one has become known as Melt, obviously due to the incredibly cool cover art by Hipgnosis, of course. What amazing album covers didn't they do? The album's biggest hit is Games Without Frontiers, featuring support vocals from Kate Bush. Definitely not the last time these two would collaborate. The lyrics are really clever, comparing war and international diplomacy to children's games. Andre has a red flag, Cheyenne Ching's is blue. They all have hills to fly them on, except for Ling Tai Yu. Dressing up in costumes, playing silly games, hiding out in treetops, shouting out rude names. The album's second single was No Self-Control, another really interesting track. When asked about the song's meaning, Gabriel said, "That's something which I've observed in myself and in others. In a state of depression, you have to turn on the radio or switch on the television or go to the fridge and eat, and sleeping is very difficult. Got to get some food. I'm so hungry all the time. And I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop. Got to get some sleep. I'm so nervous in the night. Well, I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop. And that, of course, Dragon Attack. I've always loved that one. Queen definitely took an overall lighter approach to their music, starting with this album. But that tune definitely rocks. Written by guitarist Brian May. He was always the inveterate rocker of this band. For me, Dragon Attack has always been right there in the tradition of great classic rock tunes like Fleetwood Mac's Oh Well and Led Zeppelin's Black Dog. You've got the insistent but insanely catchy guitar riff, which gives way to the bluesy a cappella vocal in the verses. Considering how insanely popular Queen still is today in 2024, I find it surprising that The Game was the band's only US #1 album, and contained the band's only 2 US #1 singles, Another One Bites the Dust and Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Crazy Little Thing was written by Freddie Mercury as a loving tribute to the rock and roll of the 50s, people like Elvis Presley and Cliff Richard. It's a great little throwback tune in D Mixolydian. I like what Mercury does with his melody. He adds a bluesy feel by incorporating some flatted thirds along with the major third that we expect in Mixolydian mode. This thing called love, I just can't handle it. Right there on handle, that's a flatted third. F note, the flatted third of D. But then as we head into the chorus, we get, I ain't ready, crazy little thing called love. Nice borrowed B flat chord there, by the way. Hear that major third? To me, somehow that just signals that the chorus is at hand. Very cool. The song also features a great period guitar solo from Brian May. He more or less channels Elvis's guitarist James Burton for it. And he even plays a Fender Esquire guitar rather than his usual homemade red special. It's always odd to see Brian May playing anything other than that guitar. I distinctly remember when that song first came out, lots of people saying how lame those lyrics were. Da-do-do-do, da-da-da-da, you gotta be kidding me, that's the stupidest song I've ever heard. But I'll tell you what, those people really miss the whole point. You've got to dig a little bit deeper than that. All you've got to do is listen to the first verse to know that there's a deeper meaning here. Don't think me unkind. Words are hard to find. They're only checks I've left unsigned from the banks of chaos in my mind. And when their eloquence escapes me, their logic ties me up and rapes me. Obviously, what Sting is saying here is that in many cases, the simplest expression is the most profound. And also, I think that words are often woefully inadequate to express what we're feeling. Which brings us to the much maligned chorus. Da-do-do-do, da-da-da-da is all I want to say to you. Da-do-do-do, da-da-da-da, their innocence will pull me through. Zenyatta Mondatta was the third Police album, and like all of their albums, it was a huge hit, #1 in the UK, #5 in the US. Regarding the album's unusual title, Police drummer Stuart Copeland says the band liked the way it rolls off the tongue, but there are also several oblique references to disparate elements. For example, you've got the word Zen in there. Apparently, there's also a reference to a Kenyan politician of all things named Jomo Kenyatta. You've got the French word for the world, le monde, in there. And finally, there's a little bit of an echo of the band's previous album title, Regatta de Blanc. The album's biggest hit, of course, is Don't Stand So Close to Me, the band's rock and roll rendition of Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, or Nabokov, as Sting pronounces it in the song. No question what's going on here right from the get-go. Young teacher, the subject of schoolgirl fantasy. She wants him so badly, knows what she wants to be. Musically, this tune has a distinct reggae feel, as so many Police songs do. This is one of those songs that has a very dark-sounding verse and a very happy-sounding chorus, The verses are in G minor. The chords are E flat to G minor. And then for the chorus, they leap into D major and everything brightens up, which is really kind of interesting considering the lyrical subject matter. Don't stand so close to me. And as usual, Sting's melody makes great use of some extensions and alterations. Take, for instance, the opening line, sung over the E flat major chord. He starts on the 5th, but then goes to a sharp 4, and finally settles on a 2. Young teacher, the subject. That melody is filled with longing, which is, of course, very appropriate to the lyrics. Young teacher, the subject of schoolgirl fantasy. She wants him so badly, knows what she wants to be. Inside her, there's longing. This girl's an open page, bookmarking. She's so close now. This girl is half his age.
I had the one-on bandit fever. There was an arrow through my heart and my soul, and the big wheel keep on turning. Neon burning up above, and I'm just high on the world.
Making Movies is the third Dire Straits album. It was a great success, number 4 in the UK, number 19 in the US. During the recording of this album, band leader Mark Knopfler and his brother David Knopfler, the rhythm guitarist, began having heated arguments, which resulted in David leaving the band and Mark re-recording all of his guitar tracks. I love the song Romeo and Juliet. The lyrics are brilliant. They contain elements not only of the famed Shakespeare play, but also West Side Story, and even a nod to the old pop song, My Boyfriend's Back. The lyrics tell the story of a romance. The couple come from a rough neighborhood. The woman is an actress. She finds fame and moves on. In verse 2, we get, come up on different streets. They both were streets of shame. Both dirty, both mean. Yes, and the dream was just the same. And I dreamed your dream for you, and now your dream is real. How can you look at me as if I was just another one of your deals? And the verse ends with, you promised me thick and thin. Now you just say, oh, Romeo? Yeah, you know, I used to have a scene with him. But musically, my favorite track might be Skate Away. It's about a young girl who roller skates through the streets of the city at night, racing down one-way alleys, dodging cars, and generally ruffling feathers. It makes use of a great songwriting trick that I don't think we hear enough. They do a pre-chorus that doesn't immediately result in a chorus. We get verse, pre-chorus, and then back to the verse, and then finally pre-chorus, chorus. Well, the cars do the usual dances. Same old cruise with a curbside crawl. But the roller girl, she's taking chances. Just love to see her take them all. And then we get the pre-chorus. We go to an A. No fear alone at night, she's sailing through the crowd. In her ears the phones are tight and the music's playing loud. Now that really seems like it's setting us up for a chorus, but no, psych, back to the verse. But then finally, after the second verse and another pre-chorus, 3.5 minutes into the song, we get the payoff. In her ears the phones are tight and the music's playing loud. She gets rock and roll in a rock and roll station, in a rock and roll dream.
I was on the outside when you standing at me. I was looking at myself.
Years ago, I had one of my guitar students tell me that he thought U2 was a great band, but that they would be even better if they had a different bass player. And I could not have disagreed more. And that intro we just heard from I Will Follow, the tune that put U2 on the map, is a great example why. We start off with a classic Edge guitar riff, very simple but effective. He's playing B and A notes on the B string while droning the first string open. I suspect most bass players would probably do something like this over that part. E, A. That would be the obvious choice. After all, the Edge is playing an A on his guitar at that point. But it's a little bit bland. Instead, in a stroke of genius, Adam Clayton gives us this. He goes to C, and that adds such a great tension there. That C forms a minor third when combined with the A that the Edge is playing. Very simple, but perfect. You don't want Les Claypool in this band. This album really felt like a breath of fresh air when it was released. The record is produced by Steve Lillywhite, who would be the band's producer all the way up until 1984, when Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois hit the scene for the Unforgettable Fire album. On Boy, Lillywhite and the band studiously avoid so many of those cliched 80s production elements that were so prevalent on new wave / alternative records of the period. And I think this was a great move. It really contributes to the timelessness of this music. And of course, Bono was a charismatic frontman and thoughtful lyricist right from the beginning. Recurring themes on this album seem to be childhood, adolescence, and the transition from boyhood to manhood. A great example of this is Twilight. I look into his eyes, they're closed, but I see something. A teacher told me why. I laugh when old men cry. My body grows and grows. It frightens me, you know. The old man tried to walk me home. I thought he should have known. In the shadow, boy meets man. Now, some have interpreted these lines as referring to unwanted advances from an older man to a young boy, but I don't know if I share that view. And of course, we have to talk some more about the Edge and his unique guitar style. It was like nothing else we had heard at the time. He built a style based not on virtuosity, but on the clever and tasteful use of effects, particularly delay. He talks at length about his guitar style in the great documentary film It Might Get Loud. I've mentioned it before on my channel. There's a scene where he demonstrates how so many of these massive sounding riffs that he plays are really just a couple of notes, sort of uninspiring without the effect. A great example of this is the Electric Cove from this album. That intro was definitely a harbinger of things to come from the Edge. I played around a little bit with my old Boss DD3 digital delay pedal. It's not spot on, but it's close enough. I think you'll get the idea. Watch my right hand. You'll notice I'm letting the pedal do the work. You're hearing a lot more notes than what my right hand is actually playing.
Distant lights from across the bay. Babylon sister, shake it. Babylon sister, shake it. So fine, so young.
Probably my favorite track from this album, Babylon Sisters, featuring one of the many jaded, hedonistic characters that populate so many Steely Dan songs. Here, the protagonist is an older man who appears to be involved in a love triangle with two younger women, presumably the Babylon Sisters of the title. The trio are on their way to the coast for a long weekend, and he's telling the girls how great it's all going to be. This is no one-night stand, it's a real occasion. But right from the beginning, there are hints that maybe he's getting a little bit old for this type of thing. Turn that jungle music down just until we're out of town. In that line, he sounds more like the girl's father than a love interest. And by the second verse, reality has fully set in. Well, I should know by now that it's just a spasm, like a Sunday in TJ, that it's cheap but it's not free, that I'm not what I used to be, and that love's not a game for three. Gaucho was a bit of a departure for Steely Dan. More keyboard, less guitar. To me, it always felt a bit like a Donald Fagen solo album, almost a precursor to the Nightfly, which he would release in 1982. This is not at all surprising when you consider that the life of Fagen's partner, guitarist Walter Becker, was in utter chaos at this time. His drug use was escalating dangerously. He was struck by a car walking to his apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And to make things even worse, his girlfriend OD'd around this time, and the woman's family sued Becker, claiming that he was somehow responsible. Many of the contributions he made to this album were via phone call with Fagen. But in spite of all that, there's some great music on this album. Hey 19 was the album's most successful single, cracking the top 10 in the US. The subject matter here is very similar to Babylon Sisters. Once again, we have an older man, or perhaps the same older man, partying it up with some college girls and bemoaning the fact that they have absolutely nothing in common. Hey 19, that's Aretha Franklin. She don't remember the Queen of Soul. She thinks I'm crazy, but I'm just growing old. Way back when, in 67, I was the dandy of Gamma Chi. Sweet things from Boston, so young and willing. Moved down to Scarsdale, where the hell am I? That's it for now. Please stay tuned as we continue to work our way up through the decade of the 1980s. If you'd like to make a financial contribution to the channel, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com or PayPal. There are links in the description of this video. See you soon.